Hey folks, I'm Ben Sloat. I'm the juror for MJ2 for Concord Art. Welcome to my digital artist talk where I'll be presenting work from my latest project called Academy of Light Weymouth. First image I got of the place, this is the site visit here in Weymouth. It's a real estate office and this is the wall. And the piece was to be to fit the wall and be at elevation and also hide the wiring inside the wall. So ultimately, this is what the piece looks like. You can see it's made out of a range of found materials. And I wanted this to look, reflect architecture in a lot of ways and reflect what they do at the real estate office. So you can see that the materials on the left go from uh, exterior materials towards kind of interior materials towards cultural materials. So we start here with things like brick. Here are some found paper. These are flat bricks, by the way, not full-size bricks. They're thin bricks. Then on top here we have some shingles and exterior wood, and that kind of transforms into interior wood. And so some of the elements like these black bricks kind of transform into black exterior wood, then they become black tile, and then ultimately here they become clothing. Same thing with the white, transforms from one material to another. And I love this idea of the kind of splaying out of an entire building at once, kind of recombined and sort of seen in this constant unfolding sort of pattern. Similarly, when you look at the clouds, they're all made of neon and the wiring goes into the wall and comes out of the bottom. I wanted there to be a sense of circulation. So maybe the eye starts with this neon piece on the bottom and kind of goes counterclockwise to this one here, and then rotates around to this much larger one. And then ultimately these two neon face each other. And I love the idea of a cloud being a site of aspiration and imagination, and how that sort of integrated with the materials here. So this is a kind of a longer piece in terms of how it sort of came into conceptualization and materialization. Originally, I wanted to use these glass panels, which I had collected years ago, these kind of modernist glass panels. But it turned out that the folks didn't want to sit with these very heavy glass panels over them, so I had to make an adjustment. But I really like the movement and the motion of the panels, the kind of idea of adjacency or abutting. One form, one color, one texture transforms into another, and so that would come into the last version of this. Um, and this is part of a series called Academy of Light, which started with this project, Academy of Light Copenhagen 2011. And this was a project where, it was a gallery that one could see from the outside. And so I made this large structure. This is all prismatic acrylic. So the acrylic would change during the day in terms of its color. And as a viewer walked by, they might come by at 10 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, and you would see a completely different set of visuals. And then at night, light would come out of the inside, and based off the kind of subject position of the viewer, things would look different as well. So I was really interested in light itself being a character and relating within a very specific cultural context. The next iteration of this is in Augusta, Georgia. Here's a full-size installation with a different kind of hanging structure. This is a local, pendant light that I sourced in the area. And with a variety of reflective materials. So we have this kind of reflective wallpaper. This is very much related to a residency I did in China in 2012. So you can see wallpaper from China, this gold-leafed wallpaper. You can see slideshow of images from China pushing through the main object. And again, it was a different way to create an ongoing and transformative visual. And also with neon, I've been working with neon for a while now. And so the kind of circulation of clouds was probably initiated in this piece here in the Kunsthalle Charlottenburg in Copenhagen 2015, a project called Cloud Formation, in a darkened gallery it's really hard to photograph the people and the neon, so you can see the people here. But the idea here was the neon sort of stretched architecturally up to the ceiling and then around to other walls. And I started doing this neon probably around 2010. You know, my background is in photography, and I often thought of neon as a kind of photographic. That is, you know, the etymology of the term photography is the graphics of light, and this is directly a light graphic. I wanted to sort of play with the permanence of neon. It's a very fussy, delicate, fragile material with imagery that, number one, was not about any kind of, you know, solicitation. I think neon is often associated with signage, so this kind of broadcast, this cultural broadcast. But at the same time, to design neon, it's basically contour drawing, but I love that it transforms into glass and gas with you know, electricity to activate, and also has a kind of architectural impact. Like where you hang it, it sort of transforms the space around it. And so for this early piece, which is in the Weymouth installation, you know, I wanted there to be kind of pairing, that these two were in relationship. So this early exhibition in Boston, these two neon take a corner, and so they kind of address each other in this way. I'm also interested in kind of cultural collage or kind of rematerialization. This is a project called Package from China from in Galway, Ireland, a solo show, where I collected a lot of materials from a very inexpensive dollar store near my studio at the time in Roxbury. And I was interested in the issue of value, the issue of transformation, the you know, I love the idea of these kind of materials being raw materials, being transformed into art in my studio in Boston and then sent to Europe for exhibition, and the kind of, you know, sense of this variety of textures and colors and cultural associations, but also, you know, I really enjoyed building these different letters. So this letter R is made out of kind of American flag tissues, and then you know, after Valentine's Day, plush animals are much cheaper. So this is just like that fuzzy stuffed animal material with some like studded punk belts, and then these are lenticular still lives that I cut into letter H. So, you know, just how these could transform was really interesting to me and comes into this project here. And also in doing research, which I find to be a really key piece of any project. You know, Weymouth turned out to be a place that Frank Lloyd Wright lived as a child. And in fact, the only place outside of the Midwest he lived in for any period of time. And so I've always been interested in Frank Lloyd Wright. So I found some tiles that he had made, and I really like this sort of circulation of circles here underneath a kind of grid pattern. So I was looking at that. This is an Ennis tile from Ennis House in Los Angeles, and it's done in a Mayan revival architecture. You might recall this style of architecture tile from Blade Runner. It was used as a kind of model for some of the architecture there. And where my studio is in West Cambridge, near Mount Auburn Cemetery, the cemetery itself is an Egyptian revival architecture. So I love these sort of cultural transformations, which I have a kind of materialized in contemporary usage. So preparing my studio, you know, I don't have a very big studio. It's probably 200 square feet, maybe a little bit more. And the largest wall I have is 18 feet. We're at 16, plus I added 2 in a kind of another area. And so here I prepared some plywood backing, and then I collected a number of materials I had lying around the studio, which I was going to sort of transform for this project. So you can see the studio here is relatively organized and clean. Above this, incidentally, this is an earlier project I did with drywall, these drywall pieces, and made this collage. It didn't quite work, but it's been sitting in the studio for years. And so now it sort of becomes embedded in this piece as well. So often some older pieces that don't quite go anywhere end up becoming really present in newer works. So you can see with these materials, here's that prismatic acrylic, which changes as you move around it. and we have pieces of wood and found wood. Later, there'd be more parameters for what could be used, but these are kind of like the first pass at looking at materials. Here's some fencing and some cinder blocks, which I ended up not using. So laying it out, I wanted a sense of movement and motion. So I started with these kind of reclaimed wood pieces that ended up not having a logic I thought was very useful. But I started kind of plotting out where the neon should go and what relationship the neon could have with various materials. So here's an early one of this smaller piece with this kind of hexagon, this laser cut piece of hexagonal prismatic acrylic, which I ended up not using, but I just wanted to see how it would relate or react. So these started being laid out, imagining what it would look like. But also finding, so I ended up finding these frames. These are actually kitchen shelving, for like a kind of corner piece. I got it at a reclaimed materials place in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I spray painted them different colors, and I really like the offset of this kind of bold color with the neon coming off of it, so that ended up being a logic that ran through to the final one. Here's another kitchen shelf that ended up becoming spray painted metallic blue. And again, kind of pointing back to that Lloyd Wright tile. So this starts to kind of circulate. Here's my attempt to make an Ennis tile, but it didn't quite work, so I dropped that. Similarly, this is a tray I found at a Savers, but the imagery was too distracting, so that ended up being kind of full-on green. And then, looking at different materials in my studio, here are some old test prints. So I cut them into a brick shape, and that ended up being used. And then finding other materials I had, so the thin brick, different kinds of wood. This was some shelving. My studio used to be a guitar store, so in the basement are just kind of some old materials they use for presentation. And I was also looking at, I'm from the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I've always been fascinated with these different eras meeting each other architecturally around. So these are images taken in Richmond, Virginia. I've done some projects there. In fact, I have a dormant public art project I was selected for, but can't be completed under a bridge due to engineering constraints. But Richmond's a really beautiful town and has some really fantastic architecture. So I love, this relationship of the cobblestone meeting, this, doorway here, and then the kind of different layers, and I even love the wiring where it meets the window, all of that. I mean, this is pretty perpendicular, but there are other elements here. I just find myself thinking a lot about hand-painted signs, kind of collisions between things that are functional versus things that are aestheticized or things that are weathered. Here's another really good example of different eras of brick and this kind of old sign intersecting. I just find that really meaningful and also kind of visceral. So that comes into the project here. So I start building this, and I don't try to hold on to too many things, but I had a lot of paper I'd collected in Berlin and New York. Just I love the kind of cultural artifacting. Here are some prints on aluminum I had but wasn't using, and just to start creating a sort of visual here. I also had some images of kind of static from television, which ended up helping with the sort of logic of this piece as well. But as I started building it, it started looking too linear, too straight, too clean. And I had to kind of play with that a little bit. So it just, my eye just became sort of less engaged. And as a viewer, I always find myself, I want to do work, and I wasn't doing enough work here. So looking back to Lloyd Wright, strangely, I'd gone to my cousin's house, this new apartment, and there was an old Lloyd Wright book, like a really large one, and I took it, and this was like, right before COVID, kind of serendipitous. And so I really liked some of the exterior designs of the Lloyd Wright, or where these planes would meet and intersect and kind of go off and create dimension. And also looking back to Richmond, Virginia again, which can be many cities. Just these different eras sort of colliding and creating a kind of movement. So these are the cobblestones on one of the streets in Richmond with some of their fantastics. I love the way these manhole covers look, and I would love to incorporate manhole covers into a future piece. But maybe they're here because they kind of have a circularity in the midst of all these kind of diagonal movements and transformation. So I ended up cutting a lot of these diagonal parts, just maybe to create a sense of movement, but also to create a kind of new colliding plane. So this is on the right side of the piece, kind of final version, where it's made out of tile. And in fact, the company gave me some of their materials they used in their renovation. So I got some tile and I got some wood. And I wanted to incorporate that. You can also see that the kind of unevenness of the surface relates back to that Ennis tile by Frank Lloyd Wright. So I was able to play with that kind of surface a lot. So I started rebuilding this, incorporating these diagonals. You can see what is holding all this onto the wall is Velcro. So Velcro is definitely a beloved product. I think over time you find materials that you really like Velcro, and materials that you really hate, like glue guns, which are totally unreliable. Don't use glue guns. So this gets built in the studio. It gets, placed out what goes where. Then has to be transferred onto these panels. These are half-inch panels, birch, 4x4 feet, and 5 of them together comprise the entire project, and that way I can move it easily, fit it into my minivan, and install it easily. So you can see it being built. Originally, it had a lot of quilting here, but that it ended up not holding a shape very well. You can see the kind of glorious mess that is starting to become built. And in fact, right here, these are ceiling tiles that I have in my own house, and I had extras of it. You can see some carved drywall from some other pieces. This is some molding here. Yeah, this is me at the kind of saturation point of mess here in the studio. And, using the confined space, I think of the small studio as a kind of functional constraint. How do you fit things in there really well? And one of the artists I admire the most is Giacometti, and apparently his studio was about 200 square feet, and he had like enormous pieces. So this is moving towards installation. I really credit my installer, Brian Unwin, for coming up with a really clean, beautiful solution. So we built this frame first that everything could hold on to. All the panels, you can see the corners are not attached, and that way those can be screwed in safely. These are all screwed into the studs. And then all the spaces in between where the circular frames would go are left open, and I had to install them on site. It took about 8 days on site to put everything together. So this was pretty time intensive, but there are over 700 pieces here, so that's to be expected. So as we start installing, we also have to drill the holes in the wall for the wires to go. So professional electricians had to come and put that through and just make sure the neon was safely put up there. You can see a number of other pieces have been glued on here, and then they're taped on with painter's tape just to hold them in place as the glue sets, and then the painter's tape is easy to take off. Painter's tape, another wonderful material. Overall, it was great to see the work come together. I was unable to see the entire piece in my studio just because I didn't have the space, and just to kind of see the work evolve and transform. I also grouted a lot of the seams here. That would provide stability, but also provide a sort of visual connection to that sensibility of materials transforming from the exterior to the interior. So here's a panorama video of this. And so ultimately, the piece is in the window. This is when it was not quite finished, but I really like this image with the exterior. So it's on Trotter Street in Weymouth. Please come check it out at Mio. And I like seeing how the work looks at different times of day. So I was there when it was snowing. I was there when it was very bright out. I was there at nighttime, and there's a really interesting dimension. And again, the piece makes me do work, which I always appreciate.